Hello, hello. Y'all can hear me out there? Okay, all right. How y'all doing? I'm good too. Okay, so my name's Naomi Proctor. I love how you said Naomi. I'm gonna put that twist on it when I speak to people from other countries. I'm Naomi, okay? But I'm so glad to be up here. First of all, I just want to we already acknowledge God, but I just want to tell him with you all that I love you, Lord. And it's a privilege to be in your kingdom and to represent you. And I just had to say that because it's beautiful. So what I want to do is introduce my awesome identity crisis that I once had but have no more. And I want you all to follow me on a journey. So those mirrors that you have, at times I'm going to ask you to look at them, and I'm going to ask you to do some things to interact with yourself, to give you some inner thoughts about what's going on in your life, and to also bring you into mine so we can all walk out of here celebrating God's freedom in all our lives. That sound good? Sound great? All right, awesome. So I'm going to read from this. It's really funny because when I was getting prepared for this, I was able to do it without looking at this, right? And then I had so much that I wanted to tell you all. I said, God, you got to break this down for me because I got 30 me's in me. Like, this isn't going to work. So let's just jump right into it. So I want to go into what identity crisis mean, just to make sure we're clear on that. So identity has many synonyms. It's character, existence, identification, name, uniqueness. It's one's status, distinctiveness, etc. Okay? A crisis is an emotionally significant event or radical change of a status in a person's life. And that's really where I'm going to stick my story at. But an alternate meaning of that is also it's a time of intense difficulty, trouble, and danger. And I guarantee you we all have experienced something like that, whether it's a spider about to fall on your head or you're going through something really traumatic where it's costing you your life, okay? And your life meaning your soul, your spirit, your mind, your physical body, whatever is life to you in that moment. That's what I'm implying about. So if somebody asks me, Naomi, what would you say outside of Webster's dictionary, his meaning, what does identity crisis mean to you? I would ultimately say it's living and functioning, making decisions under a mindset that you don't even know doesn't belong to you, and that mindset making decisions for you makes you who you really are live out its consequences. That's an identity crisis, and that is absolutely my life previously, okay? So let's get into it. So you'll see here in a minute an awesome 5-year-old with a snapback on, with a little pink hat, and that's me with swag. Y'all like that? So today, obviously, I'm future forward with my fashion. We still rocking snapbacks, and as you see some awesome fellas with me. Those are my brothers, and one of them is my cousin. In that time of my life, I had a man enter into my life, my stepfather, soon-to-be stepfather, and my mother was very young and having me. And she had some broken issues, like many of us all born with without even knowing. And in that, she allowed someone to come into her life that wanted to use her situation and gap and divide in her own soul for his advantage. Does that make sense? So I, at age 5, like all of us, at some point see our reflection in the mirror. At some point we look and we go, that's cute. What is that? Oh, my God. You know, when we're young, we pick at our body parts. Your mama say, stop that. What you doing? Put down your dress. Pull up your pants. Get out your shoes. Okay, right? So you start figuring out, like, I'm somebody, I'm something, I'm walking. And at that moment in my life, when I finally looked in the mirror of who I was, it fell in front of me. And as we know, when a mirror falls, it can break in a half piece or 40 different pieces. But the interesting thing about a mirror when it breaks is that if you try to put it back together, the same mirror, the same frame, the vision is distorted when you're looking at it. I know one time I was trying to fix the back of my hair, and I tried to use one side, but one side looked awkward, so I said, I'm going to use the cute side. But either way it goes, it doesn't give you an accurate view of really what's going on, correct? So that was what was happening to me. And then the flip side of that is I remembered the face and the image of my identity. I remembered who I was, but at the same time, I'm looking at multiple images, and even though they look like what I saw, they look distorted and different. But I don't have a recollection of what that is. So I would just pick up a piece in life and say, okay, I'm going to rock with this today. And then I would pick up another piece at another time in my life and say, I'm going to rock with this today. And what was happening was that I was becoming scattered, just like those pieces in the mirror. In all of those scatteredness, this man who came into my life, when he stepped in, he decided that what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you what I never had, and that's life. And when I refer to the man, I want you to think of in the context of the enemy of your soul, meaning the enemy, because that's really who we fight against. This man was allowed to walk through the front door. He peered through the eyes of my mother. He spoke to me with her voice. He sowed seed into my heart. He hid behind her blindness. He allowed her eyes to look at me in purity to redefine what love was in my sight. All right? He watched me long enough to not only make a suggestion of fatherly love to me, but also redefine what that was for me. So the remainder of my life, I was going to struggle with some things that at 5 I never even knew existed, right? So there began a trend in my life, and for 10 to 15 years, this would be the trend of my life. I would lay down at night. I would tussle in my sheets and hide myself. He would come peering in the room, making sure everybody's asleep, and the fight begins. And night after night after night after night after night after night after night, eventually when I got older, day after day after night after night after day after day, my mother stayed with him for 10 years. So for literally half of those years, I was being molested and raped by this man. At some point, I told her, Ma, this dude messed with me. You need to get the shotgun, put it to his head, okay? That was obviously my real reaction. She believed me at first. Things started to toil in her. She was like, nah, my man can't do that. Now, I wasn't there for the conversation, but I'm just going to say that's probably what happened. And so what happened was that I became a person that was unsafe in my own residence. At a very young age, I didn't know how to cover myself. I didn't have control no more. My environment was all screwed up. I was lost. I was confused. And that was the nature of me growing up. So I was growing up in this difficult situation. And the crazy thing is, like a plant, when you put it in the garden, right? If the soil is good, the plant's going to be great. But if that soil is bad, that plant is going to have a struggle. And so even though God birthed life into me before I got into my mother's womb, this is about identity crisis. I already knew who I was. Before you got into your mother's womb, God already knew who you was. Jeremiah 1:5, it talks about it. He formed you, he knew you, he shaped you, and he gave you a destined purpose that he designed. So that's what God had already put in me. But because I was put in a broken shell that didn't understand that yet, I lived out the life under identity, a different mindset, a mind that was cultivated by lies. And I walked out my identity not in the God-likeness of who I was, but in the brokenness of something that did not belong to me. And so the rest of my life became this dictatorship of, if this doesn't look like what you came out of, Naomi, it isn't for you. And how many of y'all know that unless you're actually giving something to compare your normal to, you think that that's normal? And so that became the nature of my life. And so I make crazy decisions sometimes. I do some crazy stuff, and then I go, God, why did I do that? And God normally didn't answer me. And if he did, I probably didn't hear him because I was so jacked up in my hand, I probably wouldn't have knew it was him anyway. And so my decision-making would continue. Just so I don't bore you with the same story, I'm going to give you an idea of what bad decision-making skills can bring you into in your life. Not only was I born fatherless to a broken teenage mother, not only was I raped and molested for 4 to 5 years and beaten for 7, my mother survived stage 4 cancer twice. I had a brother who's of African descent who had cystic fibrosis, and he passed away as well. He never got to deal with the childhood issues that we went through. So in my mind, I'm like, oh my God, he lived for nothing. I had a baby brother, another one, who suffered from schizophrenia, bipolar, and other mental issues stemming from the childhood trauma. Before the trauma, nothing. After the trauma, he don't know where he's going in life. I also, because of it, made decisions to sell drugs. I used drugs. I became an alcoholic. I also never been with a man, okay? I only been with women. Not only was I being with women, but I was messing with all my friends that were women. And then on top of that, that led me to a role where I actually messed with a pastor that was a woman. That's really deep. And yes, this pastor believed in Jesus Christ, okay? So I'm going through life, and I'm making all these decisions, and they're leading me into this deep, dark place. And all I'm looking at in the mirror is the identity of all these fractured pieces saying, but I thought this was me. And every time I do something wrong, I drop a piece and I jump on another one. I drop a piece and I jump on another one. And that was my life. I'm going to say something called side note. When I say side note, I want you in your coolest, I don't care if you're from New York, if you're Southern, if you're from out of states, I want you to be like, side note, well, side note, yo, whatever you got to say, okay? So we can do a test real quick. So, side note. Oh, y'all dope. A lot of times in life, we assume that we're being used by what is defining us in that moment. So a lot of times, if I use, let's say, a pump for a nail tack, if nobody never told me that that pump was not supposed to be used that on your feet, and you're supposed to use a hammer, I'm assuming this is the right tool for the situation. That makes sense? I want you guys to walk with me here. Going through a lot of years of confusion and misconceptions about what is healthy versus normal versus daily and normal, I came to a realization that God is the one that needs to help me, and that not even I had the answers I was looking for. One thing that I realized in all of my searching was that even when I went to churches and I would go in, and I was living a very vicarious lifestyle. I was living in the LGBT community. I had ended up living with so many different women, being and acting like I was a man, getting in groups and clans and cliques with people. And I didn't realize that what I was wearing would cause rejection at times from people because they didn't understand, because they couldn't see what had happened to me that surrounded that pure heart that God had created. And so sometimes when I go into a church, I would get beat up. People would scorn me. People would throw me out. Some people would say, you're not honest, you're not real. And what that would do, again, the enemy trying to tell me, God don't love you either. He didn't have a plan for you. That 90% you went through in life, that was all God anyway. That was your destined plan. So I kept walking in that. And did I mention on top of that, that even my mother, my stepfather, and everyone in the house, they were also all Christians. So what the enemy doing, he was setting up a double standard. He was trying to make sure that I understood that God rejected me. And then he was also trying to make sure that I never got to my destiny and the identity of who I was. And the truth of the matter is, guys, no one can find out who they are and their identity unless they get to the source first. So I just want to leave you guys with something that God gave me as an answer to how I found out who I was. God sets up everything like a body. He talks about how when you're in his fold, you're the body of Christ, correct? So by you being in the body of Christ, it's a way that you function. My eyebrows will never communicate with my toes, ever. This one don't need to be telling it what to do, and this one don't need to be telling you need to stay straight, don't buck against my feet, and you need to keep cute. Thank you. That's how this is going to work, right? But it's interesting because my spinal cord and my mind distribute. I'm sorry, y'all. Look, I got a small ear. My spinal cord and my mind distributes all the information that I need to my body. So we're going to call the spinal cord and the mind God. He's the source. The members, which is us, is the other body parts. Now, the interesting thing is that when you talk about the members of the body, you talk about moving the kingdom's purposes. We talk about unity. But what he showed me was that when you get into the source with him and you align yourself with him with understanding, and then you find out that you're a toenail or maybe you're a foot, then you two won't even really be communicating. But what will happen is that you're connected to the source. He tells you two what to do, and in unity, we all function together. That makes sense? So it's so interesting how God allows us in him to find our identity by finding him and then finding us. Then in that unity, he brings it all together, and in love, we dwell with one another. So all I want to say is that if you do know who you are, encourage someone to find out who they are, and let them find out who they are in God and God alone. Let all the affirmations that you give, let all the encouragement that you give, let that come from him. Let that be inspired from him. Let him be the beacon of light for them, and you just be that friend and that support system to allow them to be used by God on his behalf. I love you all. This was great. This is my time. God bless y'all. Y'all been wonderful.